Welcome to the deep dive. We often hear about mission trips, but what's the real story behind those, shorter stints of service?
Yeah, that's what we're really unpacking today.
We're diving into short-term missions, which, well, generally means anything less than 2 years, where there's a specific project or goal in mind.
Hmm.
And the catalyst for this exploration is actually you. You shared with us this fascinating series of personal email updates from Leon Green during his 2 months in Honduras.
Right. He was stepping in as the doctor at the Cornerstone Foundation. They run a clinic, and they're actually building a hospital for this large, pretty remote community.
Exactly. So what's so compelling about Leon's emails, I think, is the really unvarnished look they provide.
Totally. This isn't some carefully crafted narrative race. It's a
Alex.
real-time experience, someone just entering a very, very different world.
And that's precisely what we want to get into, the many layers of short-term missions.
Right.
The good intentions, the actual effects, and sometimes the unforeseen challenges.
Our goal for this deep dive really is to move beyond the typical, maybe, brochure description and understand what these experiences are truly like.
Okay, so let's jump right into Leon's initial experiences then. His first email, it really vividly describes the journey itself, quite a trek. Denver to New Orleans, then finally Belfast, Honduras.
He even notes it as a place with 4 identifiers, which immediately gives you that sense of its remoteness, doesn't it?
It really does.
Yeah.
He's heading into a situation where he'll be basically the only medical professional for a population of around 30,000 people.
Wow.
You can almost feel that mix of excitement and apprehension, as he mentions, anticipating medical cases he's never seen or even thought about.
That anticipation is such a common thread, I find. There's often this expectation of encountering the extraordinary.
Right.
And Leon touches on that, but he also quickly highlights a really fundamental shift in reality, a complete communication blackout.
Yeah, that jumped out at me too. No phones, faxes, mail, or email for 2 months.
That really reframes things, doesn't it? It just immediately underscores the isolation, the total immersion in a new environment.
It really does set the stage. And then he introduces his now quite well-known phases of a mission trip. They're humorous, but I think they capture some really fundamental truths.
They do. Phase 1 is all about staying clean and dry.
Which he rightly notes lasts about, 5 to 10 minutes?
Something like that. Then phase 2 is the struggle, trying to stay clean and dry, and the frustration when inevitably that doesn't happen.
And what's insightful about these phases, I think, is how they probably mirror the emotional arc for anyone entering a significantly different, challenging situation.
Oh, absolutely. That initial optimism, hitting the realities on the ground, and then that vital need to adapt, to accept the circumstances as they are. It's kind of a basic element of navigating cultural difference.
Precisely. Then comes phase 3.
Mm-hmm.
Just accepting being dirty and wet and kind of not being bothered by it anymore.
Which he suggests is pretty crucial for actually making the most of the experience.
Right. And then the final 2 phases, they take a bit of a darker turn, thinking you're going to die and being afraid of it, followed by thinking you're going to die and almost being afraid you won't. Let's hope you didn't linger too long in that last one.
Yeah, let's hope. But it gives you a really raw sense of the potential physical and maybe even emotional demands involved.
And for you, our listener who's interested in learning, it's important to understand this isn't just about, picturesque moments. There can be very real personal challenges.
Definitely. Now, maybe to broaden our understanding a bit, the source material we looked at provides a helpful framework for defining what we even mean by short-term mission. It lays out different types based on duration and objectives.
Right. So you've got career missions, which are longer, beyond 2 years. Then the focus for us today, short-term missions, under 2 years, specific goal.
Okay.
Then there's also cultural exposure, typically less than 4 weeks, broader learning objectives often aimed at, say, younger folks or groups wanting a brief immersion.
Right, like a taster.
Exactly. And finally, vacation with a purpose, usually even shorter, often family-oriented, and typically more focused on supporting the long-term missionaries already there.
Makes sense. And Leon's trip clearly falls into that short-term mission category.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. And the source then explores the potential benefits of these short-term missions, and it's a pretty comprehensive list, actually.
It really is. It ranges from, a direct response to what someone feels is a calling and a tangible way to participate in the Great Commission.
Yeah.
The call, often understood in Christian context, to spread faith and serve globally, all the way to fostering individual spiritual growth. and expanding one's understanding of faith and practice.
Okay, so maybe let's highlight some key potential takeaways for you, the listener. Things like increasing awareness of global mission work back in the sending community.
Yeah, bringing it home.
Providing a firsthand glimpse into the global church, maybe offering encouragement to those long-term missionaries who are committed for years. That's huge.
Absolutely. And the benefits aren't just spiritual or relational, are they? Short-term teams can also potentially alleviate some of the workload for career missionaries.
That's a good point. And provide opportunities to learn about their lives, their needs, struggles, triumphs, and maybe forge some really valuable lasting friendships.
Plus, there's the practical side, delivering needed supplies using specific skills.
Right, whether it's medicine like Leon or construction, teaching, whatever it might be.
It certainly paints a compelling picture of the potential for good that these trips can offer.
It does.
However, like with any complex issue, there's another side to the coin, isn't there? The source also outlines some potential downsides and challenges.
Absolutely. And this is crucial. One of the primary concerns highlighted is that short-term teams can sometimes inadvertently place a burden on the long-term folks.
So,
Well, sometimes creating more work for them in terms of coordination, logistics, even follow-up than the short-termers actually accomplish during their brief stay.
right, more trouble than they're worth, potentially.
Potentially, yeah. And there's also a significant risk of cultural insensitivity. Well-intentioned people might unintentionally create long-term problems.
Like imposing Western norms or just
Yeah,
misunderstanding local customs.
exactly, that kind of thing. And we shouldn't overlook the personal challenges for the participants themselves. Culture shock is real.
Both ways, right. Going there and coming back. Reverse culture shock.
Definitely. That can be really disorienting. And then there's the potential for feeling inadequate or ineffective, especially if there wasn't enough preparation or, there's a significant language barrier.
Which is often the case.
It often is. The source also points to the possibility of negative reactions to the host culture, the considerable cost, time, and money, and even feelings of guilt that can come up when witnessing big disparities in material wealth.
And this leads to a really critical point, I think. The danger of prioritizing the project, the task, over the actual people being served.
Yes. And this is where Leon's experience provides just a really striking example.
The story about the woman at the clinic.
Yeah. He recounts this encounter with a Honduran woman who, she appeared relatively well off, but she came to the clinic specifically asking for a toy, not medical care.
That detail really stays with you, doesn't it? It's quite jarring.
It is. And it really underscores a potential unintended consequence, perhaps from previous short-term teams who might have distributed handouts, maybe indiscriminately, without fully considering the long-term effects.
So it seemed to create an expectation.
It seems like it, yeah. An expectation, even among those who weren't necessarily in dire need, that, outside visitors equals gifts.
It's a powerful reminder that our actions, even with the very best intentions, can send these unintended messages, potentially problematic ones.
Really makes you think about the underlying motivations, the expectations on both sides. The source also raises this concern about superficial conversions,
Meaning?
where individuals might express interest in, say, religious faith, primarily because they associate it with receiving aid or material benefits.
Ah, okay. A sort of race Christian idea, sometimes called that.
Sort of, yeah, that kind of concern. And it's not just about material goods either. The source includes insights from long-term mission workers expressing frustration with short-term visitors.
Who come in with their own agendas.
Exactly. They arrive with preconceived ideas, maybe don't take the time to really understand the local context, and don't truly integrate with the ongoing long-term efforts. That quote from the experienced teacher in Beijing is particularly sharp on this.
And that perspective from the African believer, too, really emphasizing the need for sustained commitment, highlighting that short-termers, well-meaning as they are, often remain kind of outsiders, strangers.
These are such crucial insights. They really challenge the easy assumption that all short-term missions are automatically beneficial. They force us to consider the potential drawbacks, the importance of humility, and a genuine desire to serve in a way that respects the local culture and supports long-term work.
Okay, but to offer a more complete picture, the source does bring in some counter-arguments, some nuances, which is important for a balanced view.
Absolutely. It brings up that biblical story, the woman anointing Jesus with expensive perfume, an act some saw as wasteful.
Right, Judas complained about it.
Exactly. But Jesus deemed it incredibly valuable.
And the analogy here is,
It's a powerful reminder, I think, that the impact of some actions, maybe including short-term missions, might not always be immediately measurable or obvious. There can be these profound, deeply personal effects on individuals that maybe we just don't fully grasp.
that's fair. And the sheer volume of participation in short-term missions over the years is just staggering, actually. The numbers surged from, what, 25,000 in 1979?
Yeah, to over 500,000 by 1999. And that represents a huge financial investment.
So given that massive investment, a key insight has to be the ongoing need to critically evaluate the true impact, right? And ensure resources aren't being, well, maybe misdirected.
Which the source rightly questions. It pushes us to ask,
Yeah.
is this trend just a fad, sort of modern rite of passage, maybe even a form of self-indulgence?
Tough questions.
They are. And the critical factors it identifies come down to is the individual genuinely responding to a sense of purpose or calling. And does the mission actually produce positive, godly fruit?
Meaning?
Meaning lasting, genuine positive changes and growth in the host community, in the individual participant, and back in the sending church or community.
And it does highlight some of these positive outcomes we see. People coming back with a renewed sense of purpose.
New perspectives gained.
A changed understanding of the world, the Great Commission, and even inspiring some to consider long-term service themselves.
Yeah. The story of the children's ministry leader in Manila is a really impactful example of that. She had this personal awakening, as she called it.
About the spiritual needs of children in new church plants there.
Exactly. Her realization about kids being sort of warehoused, as she put it, and the waste of spiritually rich time and potential, that powerfully shows how a short-term experience can just profoundly reshape someone's understanding and priorities.
But it also acknowledges realistically that not everyone is cut out for this type of thing.
True. And adequate preparation, understanding the culture, basic communication is just absolutely essential. Can't stress that enough.
And it includes Tom Steller's perspective, which offers a slightly different angle. He suggests short-term missions can actually generate more interest in missions overall.
Right, kind of widening the pool of supporters rather than necessarily taking away from long-term efforts.
It's a potential ripple effect.
It is. And Stan Guthrie's summary, I think, really ties it all together nicely, acknowledging both the potential for effectiveness and the risks: cost, disruption, short-term thinking.
Inoculation against long-term commitment, even.
Right. But also the best-case results. Eye-opening experiences, becoming more aware of our own biases, ethnocentrism.
A deeper appreciation for believers in other cultures, and ultimately, doing real, meaningful kingdom work. It's a balancing act.
Definitely.
So, if someone listening is thinking about participating in a short-term mission, what are some of the key elements that make for a good team and a positive experience? The source gives some practical pointers here.
Yeah, it does. Team size is one practical thing, suggests maybe 5 to 15 people as a manageable group.
Okay.
And the value of having people with specific, useful skills, electricians, plumbers, nurses, teachers, that's emphasized.
But it's not just about skills, is it?
No, definitely not. Even more vital are the underlying character traits. Having a willing heart, a servant attitude, being a good ambassador for your home community or church.
Being a dedicated disciple, having good physical, emotional health, being well-prepared, behaving responsibly.
And keeping the focus on the core objectives, like winning souls, discipling, relieving distress, working for the kingdom, whatever the specific mission goals are.
Okay. And what about the practical realities, the logistics on the ground?
Yeah.
Sounds like people need to be ready for some pretty basic conditions.
Oh, yeah. Be prepared for multiple forms of transport, often rough, simple food, limited access to clean water, maybe intermittent electricity.
The source described it as being like backwoods camping.
That's a pretty good description, probably. And it also highlights something often overlooked: the financial side. The expectation is usually that the team covers its own costs for food, lodging, local transport.
And brings or pays for the project materials, too.
Exactly. So it represents a pretty significant investment on multiple fronts: time, energy, money, emotional preparation.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of short-term missions, looking through Leon Green's firsthand account and these broader reflections,
Yeah.
what's your main takeaway?
You know, the central thing for me is just the inherent complexity. Short-term missions aren't simple acts of charity. They are really multifaceted undertakings.
The potential for real good.
Absolutely. Profound positive impact. But also, that risk of unintended negative consequences is always there. Leon's experiences, alongside the more analytical political stuff from the source really just underscore the intricate reality.
Absolutely. It seems really clear that effective short-term missions need so much more than just, good intentions.
For sure, they demand careful thought about the local context, thorough preparation, a genuine commitment to serving and building relationships.
Not just doing tasks.
Exactly, and a constant awareness of the long-term implications of our actions.
Which brings up, I think, a really important final thought for you, our listener. Considering the significant resources, time, money, people invested in short-term missions globally,
Yeah, it's massive.
how can individuals, how can sending organizations ensure that these efforts are truly the most impactful way to engage with global needs? How do we foster change that is genuinely helpful and sustainable, both for those who go and serve and for those they aim to help?
It's a big question, definitely something worth mulling over as you think about your own potential role or your community's role in global engagement.